Thank you all for coming out tonight, and welcome. We're so happy to have you. There's a couple of thank yous to start with. I wanted to thank the Reva and David Logan Foundation and John Logan. For their incredibly generous support to the Graduate School of Journalism that makes this and other exhibitions and photo events possible. 4 years ago, the Russians are bugging us. 4 years ago, the Logan family, with the stewardship of John Logan, helped endow the Reva and David Logan Gallery at the Journalism School. They also endowed a chair in photojournalism here at the Graduate School of Journalism, which I hold. They supported our student photo magazine called Realize, and they donated David Logan's exquisite rare photo book collection to the Bancroft Library, where it's housed in a room dedicated to Reva and David Logan, both who passed away before they could see the impact of their gift. And this is the impact of their gift, that we can hold these events, we can have shows, we can have distinguished speakers come, and we also can have wonderful students learning about photography at the journalism school. It's gifts like these that help support the financial stability of the journalism school, especially in the light of the state of California, continuing shrinking budget for the university. We actually depend on the largesse of people like the Logans to keep doing these events and to keep the lights on at the journalism school. One of the things we did 2 years ago is we created the Jim Marshall Fellowship, named after the Bay Area music photographer. This fellowship was created after a posthumous exhibition of Jim's work on the Haight. And with his, the people who are running his estate and the journalism school, we decided, let's try to raise some money so that we can support students who are interested in photography. It's, in the past 2 years, supported tuition. And in fact, Kyle, right there, is the current Jim Marshall Fellow, and he's received a fellowship so he can continue studying at Berkeley. So now comes the advertisement. For those of you who might be inclined to support our fellowship and support photography, you can reach out to Marlena Telvik, who is right there. Marlena, raise your hand, wave. And Marlena has been instrumental in making this event possible. Thank you, Marlena. And also Julie. I don't know if Julie's around anywhere, probably running around somewhere. But there are envelopes outside that you can put a check in or leave a business card or your name if you are so inclined to help support the Graduate School of Journalism photography program or many of the other important programs that we have. We really count on the support of all of you to maintain journalism in a free society, which, as you know, is under attack these days. So freedom of the press is one of the most important things that we need to be thinking about in this election. And now the show. So 50 years ago, Steve Shames, right there, turn the lights up so we can see you, right, was just another white kid from Los Angeles who'd come to UC Berkeley as a freshman, and he became radicalized by the anti-war movements, like so many of us. By the summer of love, he was a sophomore with a camera around his neck. During a peace rally at Kezar Stadium in San Francisco, he was bold enough to take an image of Black Panther co-founders Bobby Seale and Huey Newton as they were selling Chairman Mao's Little Red Book to raise funds for their new organization, the Black Panthers. Steve recently told Sam Whiting of the San Francisco Chronicle, "I just caught them out of the corner of my eye, and they were so charismatic. I was just like, wow." That one image led to 6 years with the Panthers, making photographs where few other photographers were able to go. Steve has used his photography over the last 45 years? 50 years. You're older than I am. To raise awareness of social issues with particular focus on child poverty and solutions to child poverty and race. I first met Steve back in the day when we were both young movement photographers whose photographs were being published by Liberation News Service, the Associated Press of the underground newspaper movement. Steve was in the West, and I was myself in the East. I was envious of him. I've never told him this. I was envious of Steve as he was witness to so many of the powerful moments that were unfolding in the Bay Area, and his photographs of the era stood ahead above most other photographers of that time. We will have the opportunity this evening to see many of his images and hear some of his stories. We also are joined by Bobby Seale. It's an honor to have Bobby Seale with us as well, and I remember vividly reading his 1970 book, Seize the Time, in 1970 is when I read it. And like Steve, I spent time with the Panthers, mainly in Ohio and St. Louis, making photos, and we all know the Panthers have led an incredibly powerful presence in the American left and in the 60s. They were a political organization with a swagger, and also with a vision of radical change to better the lives of the Afro-American community. Coming toward the end of the epic period of the American Civil Rights Movement, the Black Panther Party burst on the scene, seeking to bring social justice to the African-American community. The Panthers described themselves as a revolutionary political organization and were founded on October 15th, 1966 by Bobby and Huey Newton, almost exactly 50 years ago. You said Saturday, I believe, is 50 years to the day. The party was to organize the black community and express their desires and need to resist the system and classism that they felt were perpetrated by the system. Bobby described the Panthers as an organization that represents black people, and many white radicals relate to this and understand that the Black Panther Party is a righteous revolutionary front against this racist, decadent, and capitalist system. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense famously had a 10-point platform and program. It was a set of guidelines that defined the Black Panther Party's ideals and the way it operated. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. We believe that black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. Huey Newton was named Minister of Defense, and Bobby Seale became the chairman of the party. During this time, the Panthers and Bobby underwent extensive FBI surveillance as part of the COINTEL program, which conducted covert and at times illegal programs surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting, and even murdering Panthers such as Fred Hampton in Chicago. As well, Bobby had many encounters with the police, and he was imprisoned in Chicago as part of the Chicago 7 trial as a result of the Democratic Convention in '68. And many of you remember, as I do, Bobby being shackled and blindfolded in Judge Hoffman's court. While in prison, he stated, "To be a revolutionary is to be an enemy of the state. To be arrested for this struggle is to be a political prisoner." Bobby continued his political activity, and Steve continued photographing him, and in 1973, he ran for mayor of Oakland, and he also is renowned as a barbecue master. And if you love barbecue, that's important. The book that Steve and Bobby co-authored, The World of the Black Panthers, is a window into the lives and times of Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton, and their comrades in the party's vital years. Steve captured the charisma of the young Newton, Seale's focused energy, Eldridge Cleaver's intensity, the disciplined style of Kathleen Cleaver and Angela Davis, Emory Douglas laying out the Panther newspaper, George Jackson and Bobby Hutton's funerals, and Panthers marching at rallies and feeding children. Virtually all of the major figures are portrayed in the book with accompanying commentaries by Bobby and the subjects themselves that touch on everything from the politics to their style. Significant turning points in the story of the party that were not captured by Steve's camera were described by Bobby with excerpts from the writing by Newton and others. And unfortunately, we sold out all of the books, but I know you can go on, I think, Bobby's website, and buy copies of the book, as well as Amazon. And so with that, please welcome Steve Shames, who will be showing work, and then Bobby Seale will be joining him. So thank you for coming.
And actually, how do you follow that? He said everything, so you can go home now. We're done. Amazing. I'm just going to just put something else up just briefly, because this is I just wanted to start with this. You know, this is Bobby Seale running for mayor of Oakland with the budget of the city of Oakland, where the money comes from and where it goes. And almost 50 years ago, have any of you watched any of the debates and seen the pathetic moderators and the stupid questions? Why didn't somebody require the candidates to do something like this? So I just want to, you know. And also this picture is important to me because the Panthers are often portrayed in all kinds of ways. But, you know, where in the media did you read that someone like Bobby actually could dissect the budget of the city of Oakland and actually talk about it? I mean, that requires a lot of intelligence and foresight and thought, and the media often miss that part of the Panthers. That is almost, you know, as often is I don't know how to get rid of this. Anyway, we'll put this up. Hang on. Let's get rid of it. Go away. We'll open this one again. Well, we better get somebody up here. There we go. Technology, right? The Black Panthers were a revolutionary organization, and they were also a political party. People don't all remember that in 1968 they ran candidates for president, for Congress, for state assembly, and state senate. It was always really important to the Panthers as a political party to register people to vote. Bobby will probably talk about this later. The Panthers also initiated more than 60 community programs, of which the breakfast program was the most well-known and the most famous, and caused the U.S. government, out of embarrassment, to start a breakfast program. Lyndon Johnson's breakfast program came after the Panthers started their breakfast program. The Panthers tested for sickle cell anemia at a time when that disease was not getting any attention from the government and the media. The Panthers started free medical clinics, which is still quite an achievement. I mean, President Obama got through a medical plan, but not a free medical plan. But the Panthers felt that medical care should be a right, just as, you know, if your house catches on fire, you call the fire department. You don't need to pay them when they come out. You pay it through your taxes, and that's a right as a citizen. Your kids go to school, to public school, as a right. The Panthers felt, which I also agree, and I'm sure most of you agree, that medical care is a right of a citizen in this, what we pretend is the richest country in the world. And I guess it's rich for some people, but not, obviously a lot of people have been left behind. The Panthers started a school, which got an award, and people from all over the world came and studied their school. The Panthers would accompany senior citizens when they cashed their checks and went shopping so they wouldn't get robbed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of women's rights, in terms of gay rights, the Panthers, again, were in the forefront. At the time, I believe the Panthers were the most progressive organization in terms of engaging women and putting women in positions of power. I won't say that women were equal back then, but where were they? How many senators were women back then? How many women were chief executives, you know, in liberal, conservative, any organization? So the Panthers paved the way for that. What I think I should do now is just show you some of the pictures. This is a picture taken in Bedford. Could you turn this light off? It's kind of in my face, so it's hard to see. That's possible. Thanks. This picture is from Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is in Brooklyn in New York, actually within about a mile from where I currently live. And if anyone is wondering why there was a need for the Black Panther Party back in 1966, maybe this picture can help answer that question.
Could you dim the house lights possibly also?
Yeah, please. Yeah, this one right here. Please, you got to get these two lights off. Thank you. Yeah. The picture that Ken talked about Bobby selling red books is picture on the right. That was in San Francisco on the march to Kezar Stadium. On the left, obviously, is not my picture, but is the first issue of the Black Panther paper, which Bobby can tell you more about later. Denzel Dahl was killed by a policeman. Aren't we glad that that doesn't happen anymore? Exactly. So the Panthers really were founded over police brutality and police killing of young black men, and obviously that is still an issue which is still with us, and actually most of the points on the 10-point program are things that we still need to be dealing with. The picture on the left is actually in Chicago when Bobby was speaking. And the negative of him speaking was actually destroyed at the Chicago Sun-Times. They put it through this little machine they used to do film, and it got destroyed. So unfortunately, I don't have a picture of Bobby speaking in Chicago, but these men were listening to Bobby speaking. And on the right is a Free Huey rally in front of the courthouse, the Alameda County Courthouse. As you know, when Huey got arrested, that became a big organizing effort for the Panthers to free Huey. And that was really the first major thing that the Panthers did to really get Huey out of jail and bring awareness to his situation. These are some Panthers at Defirmary Park, renamed Bobby Hutton Park by the Panthers. And this image was widely used in the underground press. They kind of cropped it in on just the three men and solarized it, and it became a very kind of popular image of the Panthers to show the militancy and the discipline. God, who is this? Some guy speaking. Do you know who this is, Bobby? I'm kidding. This is Bobby Seale speaking. Very charismatic speaker, and Bobby, Bobby was a mentor to me, and Bobby really brought me into the party. Ken mentioned that. And really, I had almost complete access. I mean, I could go in the offices. I could, was backstage. Whatever. They trusted me, and I loved them, and it was just a great arrangement. I admired the Panthers. I still do, and I thought that they, were doing a great job, and I think they liked my photography, and they used it a lot in the papers, and it was really I was a student when I was doing this. I was 20 years old. For any students out there, the first 2 years I photographed the Panthers, I was a student at Berkeley, cutting classes to photograph, hang out with Professor Bobby. Not that my professors at Berkeley weren't also good, but I really learned a lot from them. This is Kathleen Cleaver, was a leader among the Panthers. A remarkable woman who is now a professor, I think, at Emory University. She was a law professor at Yale University with some Panther women. She was really an inspiration to women. Do you know who that woman is? Angela Davis, absolutely. She was a Panther for about 6 months, I think, and she was a supporter. And part of what I wanted to do in the book was to show just how the Panthers engaged the youth in the community. And look at this kid. I mean, it really was incredible how the Panthers were just able to engage the black community and a lot of white students and a lot of people in the white community, and actually built coalitions with Latino groups, with Native Indian groups, with a white group, the Young Patriots in Chicago. They made coalitions with a lot of white radical students, the Peace and Freedom Party. It was really an incredible movement. This is the cover of the book, probably my best known photograph of the Panthers lined up. And again, just the sense of style, the discipline. You know, if you're running a political party, you really need, you're going to impress people, you need to be disciplined. As we know, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's some guy running for president who doesn't exhibit much discipline. And it's really wonderful, when I look back, that the Panthers were disciplined. I mean, their rallies were peaceful. Things went according to plan. A lot of that had to do with Bobby's leadership and the other leaders. But Bobby will talk about that when he talks. This is Eldridge Cleaver when he was actually at Berkeley. You may recognize that building in the background. It is on the Sproul Hall steps, walking. I think that's the Student Union, actually. He was walking down the steps. That's the crowd listening to Eldridge speak. When you read the media and they kind of want to portray the Panthers as kind of a marginal organization, And again, that little picture up there is a poster of Kathleen when she was running. She ran for state assembly, Bobby?
San Francisco.
Yeah, this is San Francisco for state assembly, and that was a leaflet the Panthers put out in 1968. Eldridge Cleaver ran for president. You can see some of the Cleaver for president there. Newton for Congress, Seal for state assembly. Bobby Hutton poster. Bobby Hutton was the first Panther who was murdered by the police. This was after Huey's trial, when he wasn't convicted of first-degree murder. Two Oakland police officers who I think were intoxicated shot up the office. And so it's kind of symbolic, this picture. And a close-up of that poster of Huey ran on the cover of the Panther paper. But it's kind of symbolic of what was going to come later. None of us realized that it was going to be quite as bad later with all the murders and shootings. That's not my picture of Bobby Hutton, but I just put that poster in just to remind us, Bobby Hutton was 17 years old, and after he had surrendered, he was shot in the back. The picture on the bottom right is Berkeley. You all recognize that, during the Third World Liberation Front. And Richard Aoki who was a Panther, was on the steering committee of that. And the speaking is George Murray, who was Minister of Education. And he's speaking at San Francisco State. San Francisco State and Berkeley were the first two universities and colleges in the United States where there were student strikes to create Black Studies departments and Black Studies courses. At that time, it was all Eurocentric. There was no women's studies. There was no Black studies, African American studies, Latino studies, Asian studies, none of that. And Berkeley and San Francisco State, with the Panthers, were part of that. There were year-long strikes to establish those departments, the strikes were successful. The departments did get established, and they still exist today, and it proliferated into women's studies and Asian studies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really an important contribution of which the Black Panther Party was part of. And when people, again, there's a general dismissal of the Panthers. Oh, they didn't really succeed. Well, in many ways, a lot of the things they did, some of the things they did are in practice. Community policing is in many communities, obviously not enough, but things are there. Panther Rally, this is in Provo, what we called Provo Park. I don't know its real name, but down in downtown Berkeley. This is a page from the book, the survival programs. How many times in the media do you see an image, a positive image of a black man like this? You know, this is a failing in America, something we really need to think of as part of the institutional racism, is just how people are portrayed in the media and in life. And the Panthers really got people, look at how he's engaged with this young kid. Something's really positive going on, and that's what I saw when I was with the Panthers. But, even today, this is not kind of the mainstream image that you see when you see a young black guy and, a young black man in the press. I love these women. No one's going to take their food away. There's two militant Panther supporters right there. That was taken in Palo Alto. There's a little girl at the breakfast program. I don't know if you can read it from way back there, but there's a list of all the Panther programs. They had a free shoe program, free clothing program. I mentioned that they would escort seniors when they went shopping in crime-ridden neighborhoods so that they wouldn't get robbed. But you can just read, you can read them, the health programs. They had a safe club. They had liberation schools. They would take busloads of relatives up to prisons. When people are in prison, they're usually in kind of rural areas. It's often, people often joke that they send young black men to rural areas, to prison, to provide employment for the residents there, because the industry's lost. And that's something that, as America, we're going to need to, I'm not going to talk at length about it, but I think you all know that the justice system is really broken in this country. The Panthers, and one of the points of the Panther program was that you needed to be tried by a jury of your peers. At that time, most of the juries were all white in Alameda County. That's true, right, Bobby? Most of the juries were all white. There weren't black people on the juries. And that's something the Panthers talked about. Medical care. Here's doing sickle cell testing. This was when Bobby was running for mayor. They had medical workers out in the community testing people. This is the Panther school, some of the Panther children. Later, children from the community went to the school. It got to be quite a well-known school. Here's some of the Panther kids. This book is nice because I went through all the pictures I had taken and found. This is one of the new pictures I found that had never been printed before. The book contains about 100 pictures that had never been seen before. Because when I was doing the book, I went through all my contact sheets and negatives. Do you all know what negatives and contact sheets are? and then found new pictures. The Panther newspaper is very important. Had a very big circulation all across the United States, and that was also a way that the Panthers engaged with the community. When they were selling the paper, they would talk to people. The Panther offices, in the book, Jamal talks about it. Jamal Joseph, who's now I think he's won an Academy Award for documentary for a film, and he's a professor at Columbia. But when he talks about when he was a Panther, that the Panther office was where people came. If you were having trouble with your landlord, or the electricity was turned off, or you lost your job, or the police arrested your kid, or any sort of problem you had, people would go to the Panther office, and the Panthers would help people. They weren't just marching around handing out leaflets and doing fists in the air. The Panthers were actually every day. Being a Panther, you would get up at 4 or 5 in the morning. You would make breakfast for kids, bring the food over, cook breakfast, get them off. Then you would either sell the paper, or you'd be working in the office. You'd be doing other things. You had political education class. Panthers were required to read. They really had to know things. That's Emory Douglas laying out the paper. And again, that was all done by hand back then. None of this digital layouts. You'd make a cutout and you'd actually paste it down. That's Gloria. This is Panthers selling the paper, but they were boycotting Mayfair. The Panthers the Panthers had their programs, and they asked merchants in the community to donate, and they also helped some of the merchants. In this case, for instance, the Panthers helped some of the black liquor distributors actually be able to buy liquor, and they were being discriminated against, and the Panthers went and helped them. And then this one liquor owner refused to donate to the program, which was kind of what the Panthers asked: if we help you, would you help us? So they picketed him. That's Jamal Joseph at a political education class. That's Bobby speaking at a community survival conference. The Panthers held a number of conferences where they registered people to vote, gave away food, and really just had rallies and just, talked to people about the issues. Panthers in Philadelphia, marching through Philadelphia. And I spent the guy in the front is Khalil, and he. When I was in Philadelphia in 1970, Huey and Bobby wanted to do a book, and Huey was going to write the book, and it was going to be my pictures, and it would be the official Black Panther book. As you know, the book never came out because Spiro Agnew, who was vice president under Richard Nixon, golfed with the chairman of Macmillan Company, which is the publisher, which had given me a contract, and the Panthers a contract for this book. And he basically said, we don't want this book to come out. How did they know that the book was even there? I mean, were they spying on us? Was Nixon spying on people, So the book never came out. It took 40 years later. The first Panther book came out. Now this book, a more complete book, came out 50 years later. But when I was in Philadelphia, when I was doing this book, the Panthers sent me to 10 different cities, and I went because most of my pictures had been taken on the West Coast in Oakland, in Berkeley, and San Francisco. So we wanted to really portray it nationally. So I spent 3 months. I drove out across the country, and photographed Panthers in the different cities. And of course, in each city, they assigned someone to take me around, make sure no one knocked me on the head and took my cameras. And this guy Khalil was the guy who went around. So I did a little piece on him just to kind of show you, here he is just talking to some women. In the book, there's a picture of him in a house talking to a woman. He's teaching a liberation class with kids. But we just showed some of the things that the Panthers did. This is the Toledo office, Toledo, Ohio. This is in New Haven. There was a time, in 1969, when after Nixon became president, he had a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover and John Mitchell, and they decided they wanted to get rid of the Panthers, and basically told J. Edgar Hoover, get rid of them. By the end of 1969, we don't want to see any Panthers around. And the FBI, worked with local police, and they assassinated a bunch of Panthers, raided offices. So Bobby issued a directive. The Panthers believed in self-defense, which let's face it. I mean, this audience are probably a lot of people who believe in gun control and nobody should have guns. But in the United States, as we know, the mainstream position is that people should have guns. And unfortunately, even wanting to keep insane people and people on the terrorist watch list the government isn't able to keep them from having guns because of these right-wing people who don't want any restrictions on it. They want people to have assault weapons. The Panthers never carried assault weapons. They carried shotguns and pistols, weapons you would use for self-defense. The Panthers were not an aggressive organization trying to make a gun revolution. They wanted an electoral revolution. But they did believe in self-defense, which is a position that most Americans, a vast majority of Americans, believe in. Unfortunately, because of racial issues, it doesn't seem like the Second Amendment applies to black people. So Governor Ronald Reagan, You all remember Ronald Reagan. I don't know what happened to him after he was governor, but he, he was governor of California and sent troops to Berkeley when I was a student, and sent the National Guard into the campus. But he also signed one of the strictest gun control laws that's ever happened in America. It basically said you couldn't have a gun within 100 feet of any public street. There's the Mulford Act. And that was one of the first things the Panthers did. They marched up to Sacramento with guns to protest that. But think about that. Here's Ronald Reagan, the icon, the darling of the conservative movement, who passed a very strict gun control law because black men and women were carrying guns, and the NRA didn't say one word. Can you imagine if Obama tried to pass a law like that? Obama is talking about, well, we shouldn't let insane people carry guns. And they're saying, he's going to take away your guns. And I don't think Obama's been in almost 8 years. I don't think he's taken a single gun away from anybody. But that's the kind of the paranoia, and that's how race kind of bisects these issues and kind of poisons our environment. And I think the Panthers were very clear about talking about that. And obviously today, as we all know, given this presidential campaign where the racists are coming out of the woodwork and saying things that maybe they believe, but they never really said publicly in the past 10 or 20 years. I think we really, we're almost back to square one, unfortunately. And I think there's a lot of work all of us in this audience and elsewhere are going to have to do. That's Fred Hampton. I never had the opportunity to photograph him, but as I mentioned, he was assassinated by the police while he was sleeping. He was drugged, and while he was sleeping, they went in and shot 40 or 50 bullets into him. These are some of the New York 21. On the left is David Hilliard with his wife. David Hilliard was chief of staff, the number 3 person in the party. That's Huey with Elaine Brown. George Jackson on the left, and that's the funeral of George Jackson. George Jackson was killed when he was in San Quentin prison. How are we doing for time, Ken? Am I okay? Okay. It's a funeral for George Jackson. This is a funny little story behind that. That's a Safeway in the back, and the manager of the Safeway went out to the police and said, they're all in my parking lot. No one can shop. I want you to clear out the parking lot. And the Oakland police said, "What, are you kidding?" And they walked away. This was the Panther office in West Oakland. And I love this picture because they were just part of the community, mowing the lawn. There's kids in there. There's a dog in there. The Panthers were really part of the community, and I think this picture shows that. And again, what I think's nice about this exhibit and this book is that pictures like this are in it, which really you don't see in the mainstream media. You really didn't see an image like this of the Panthers, that they're really just in the community and people are walking by and talking to them. It's Huey Newton. That picture with Bob Dylan. I mean, that as we know, the 60s was a time when the music and culture, the hippies and Black Power and all those things were kind of, for a brief period of time, actually kind of came together and everybody talked to everybody else. But Huey loved to pose for me. I'd go up and just take pictures of him. Huey was just like a movie star. And then Bobby and Huey. Again, here's the type of picture that you very rarely see. I mean, they're funny, They had fun with each other. Here they are just cracking up. Again, this is a type of pictures in the book, but you never would see that. That's Bobby when he was in jail. That's Erica Huggins. Erica is an incredibly brilliant woman who was a Panther leader, and she was on trial with Bobby Seale in New Haven. They tried them for murder, and actually there was a murder that was committed, but the person responsible for the murder who orchestrated it was an FBI informant. And then he turned around and said Bobby Seale ordered it. Well, that wasn't what the jury decided. So unfortunately, Bobby spent a lot of time in jail behind that. Free Bobby, free Huey. That's Big Man, Elbert Howard, one of the 6 original Panthers, wonderful guy. I love that picture on the left. To me, that kind of sums up the, at Yale University when Bobby was on trial. And I also love the hair back then. I mean, it's just, the 60s was just a magical period. Yeah, I'm coming to the end here. Bobby ran for mayor in 72, 73. I was with him virtually every day, working on the campaign, taking pictures. And we would get on the bus and just ride the bus, get in East Oakland, just ride the bus all the way down. Bobby got 40% of the vote. The Panthers registered thousands of people to vote. And 4 years later, Lionel Wilson became the first African-American mayor of Oakland. So the Panthers really helped that. They helped get Ron Dellums elected. Ron Dellums was a congressman from this area for years. Bobby running for mayor. You'll see he can talk. Then at the end of the book, I'm not going to go into it, but I really I wrote an essay and talked about where we are today, kind of taking the 10 points, what the Panthers were talking about, as a viewpoint. Where are we today? What has changed? And to illustrate that, I went down to a Black Lives Matter, rally in Washington, and took these. I just took these wonderful digital pictures in color. This was taken a couple of years ago, and you probably recognize some of the people in the posters. But I wanted to bring the book up to date. And that's it. Bring up Bobby Seale.
We wrote a 10-point platform and program. How we came about doing that is interesting, because we were up here at the University of California one night. We went up to some record boutiques up there on Telegraph Avenue, and we were going through some stuff I'd researched. I'm always researching stuff in Black history, what have you. And we started walking down the streets, going towards Hay Street, Hayes on the south side. And hordes of people, University of California, both sides of the street. And Huey wanted me to recite this poem that I had recited 3 weeks earlier at an anti-Vietnam War rally at Merritt College. Merritt College was a community college that I was enrolled in. I lived across the street from Merritt College. And we had a big packed room of 700 people in that little auditorium at Merritt College, demanding and saying that we're not going to let ourselves be drafted anymore to fight in this war in Vietnam, because this country here is not recognizing our constitutional democratic civil human rights. This was 1966. And I recited this poem at the tail end. I was the master of ceremonies for the whole program. Myself and Bertram Morrell, another organizing friend of mine, put that whole program together on Merritt College campus. And so Huey, 3 weeks later, we're up around University of California. He wants me to recite this poem because everybody loved the poem. Anti-war, young black man writing a poem about how Uncle Sammy called him full of Lucifer. Uncle Sammy called me full of Lucifer. Well, I don't give a good eagle-eyed, MacPleagle triple whammy damn, for I feel a small stick will not serve. Uncle Sammy, don't shuck and jive me. I'm hip to popcorn jazz changes you blow. You know damn well what I mean. You school my naive heart to sing red, white, and blue stars and striped songs and to pledge eternal allegiance to all things blue, true, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, white chalk, white skin with USA tattooed all over. when my soul trusted Uncle Sammy. Loved Uncle Sammy. I was a kid playing war, dying in dreams playing war for you, Uncle Sammy. You jammed your emasculate manhood symbol puffed with gonorrhea. Gonorrhea of corrupt, unrealty myths into my ungreased nigger ghetto black ass of my Jewish, Catholic, Hindu, Islamic Sioux. What? Sure, free public health penicillin cured me. But Uncle Sammy, if you want to stay a street show strongman guard, fuck your motherfucking self. I will not serve. That was a prose piece I picked up out of the Liberator magazine. It was published out of New York. It was an African-American Liberator magazine. And that was the early days, you know, before the party started, before the party was conceived of, etc. You know, that's where I was. In fact, what had happened to me, I landed this fantastic job after all my United States Air Force and stuff like that. And after all the years, you know, that I was raised a carpenter and a builder, because I was doing lot plot, three-dimensional structures and layouts for adding rooms and dens to people's homes and stuff for my father. My father's a master carpenter and builder. And that's what I was doing growing up. And there I was out of the United States Air Force, working at Kaiser Aerospace and Electronics, engineering department. I was doing electromagnetic field black light non-destruct testing for all engine frames for the Gemini missile program. I loved that job, you know what I mean? I even loved my job when I was in the Air Force, even though I couldn't get along with them guys half the time. But, you know, getting B-52 bombers off the ground, I had no politics, you know. They load nuclear weapons on them bombers at Ellsworth Air Force Base in Rapid City, South Dakota. I loved that job, getting the B-52 bomber cleaned up so it'll fly and, you know, whatever. But now, after all of that, I was becoming conscious, you know. I went to hear Dr. Martin Luther King speak. Dr. King was talking about how all of these companies in America will not hire people of color. And he just went on and on about that, you know, naming various companies and stuff. And, you know, I went to hear this guy speak, and he was a preacher. And I got tired of going to the... I stopped, very early going to the church houses. You know, in my community, the more Holy Roly Baptist churches, you know, all they preached was hell and damnation. You know, and I got tired of hell and damnation every Sunday, you know what I mean? You know, and boom, but now I'm going to go hear this preacher. What this preacher? This preacher's talking about getting rid of racism. And Dr. King was talking about what we had to do. He says, here in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area, Kilpatrick's Bread Company and Langendorf Bread Company will not hire any people of color. He says, and all across America, Wonder Bread Company will not hire any people of color. I say we're going to have to boycott them, and we want to boycott them so consistently and so profoundly, we want to make Wonder Bread wonder where the money went. Martin Luther King, Oakland Auditorium, 1962. There I am getting the hell-inspired ass. That really inspired me. I like this brother. This brother can blow. This brother can rap it down, you know. I mean, he was saying it and telling you what you got to do, and we're not going to back up and say, oh, my God. I said, hey, you know, I had my great job. You know, I was a lucky guy. Had all kind of jobs. I had all kind of professions and skills. I was a carpenter, a builder, architect, you know, structural repair, high-performance aircraft, what have you, et cetera. I had the skills and everything, and I started looking around, and next thing I know, you know, they passed that civil rights bill, and I quit my job. After 3.5 years, I quit that job working on the Gemini missile program, that NASA contract. And I went to the community, and I organized right out in North Richmond, California, me and 6 other students, 3 young white students and 3 black students we were. We were a team actually hired to do canvassing in the community. You know, it's behind the Civil Rights Bill, and we was doing canvassing. But as we worked together, we had to work as a team because we would canvass precincts and stuff like this here. We became interested in the war on poverty program stuff, you know, et cetera, and we discussed our stuff, you know, about how we could end institutionalized racism in America and all that. And so we decided to apply, you know, to put a program together. And we put together what we call a tutorial program, a youth jobs program in North Richmond, California, in that particular specific community. Yeah, we got together, wrote our proposals, et cetera, boom, 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 found out, got our 501c3 started, got matching funds and other things, you know what I mean, et cetera, and went before the board, and they approved our program. I says, wow. Then we got matching funds, and we got the building. We bought the building, put the building in, and hired 100 youth right there in North Richmond, California, that poor, low-income, basically working-class community there. And we had, of course, the 10th grade tutoring the first grade, the 11th grade, the second grade, the 12th grade, and so on. And boom, that's the first thing I did. I created a youth jobs program. Dr. Martin Luther King said they would not hire us, and I went and created a jobs program for the youth. You know, they worked 36 hours a week in the summer and 16 hours a week in the winter while they were going to school. And this was a real institution. We put that together. We didn't charge no exorbitant prices, you know, with our salaries and stuff. We just made $390 a month or something like that. You know, but when I worked at Kaiser Aerospace and Electronics in city government, I was making $600, $700, $800 a month. But my point is that we did that program that way, and we trained 8 people, and we paid them while we trained them the same thing we got to be able to run that program over an 18-month to 2-year period. And that was in North Richmond, California. 10 years ago, my son, Malik, my oldest son, came back from Iraq, fighting in Iraq. He fooled around and joined the Army Reserves back there one time. You know, when he joined those Army Reserves, what was it? The party was over. I had my own radio show in Denver, Colorado, but then I went on vacation. I had a 2-week vacation from my show, and then another people in New York flew me out there to host another guy's show for 1 week in New York. And Jet Magazine calls me up. What is this about your son going into the military service? And Ronald Reagan, he's your political foe. You know, Ronald Reagan was president by this time. I said, he go in the military service. And I said, anyway, he needed damn discipline. You know what I mean? Put him in there. And boom. And anyway, back to the subject of the youth jobs program. They called me up after my son got back from Iraq and told me to bring my family out to the city council there and the mayor and everybody. So I went there with my family and other members. And the city government gave me a proclamation for starting the first youth jobs program in North Richmond, California. I was shocked, you know what I mean? I said, whoa, right on, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm just saying that was my style. I love programs, real programs, you know. A little bit after that, I created and got Black history into the curriculum at Merritt College, and then I went to work for the city government of Oakland, California, running the youth jobs programs and other employment programs I put together, et cetera. And I was still working with the city government when we created the Black Panther Party. And I cited that poem, Uncle Sammy Called Me Full of Lucifer, you know, and then we got arrested that night up there on Telegraph Avenue after I recited that poem, you know. And went to jail and all this kind of stuff. You know, I got bailed out, what have you, et cetera, boom, boom, boom. And wound up in front of Judge Stats at Alameda County Courthouse, and they was going to put us in jail for 1 to 10 years for fighting the police, you know. Some guy, when I recited that poem and I said, fuck your motherfucking self, I will not serve. And this is an undercover cop in the yellow T-shirt and some blue jeans. You know, he didn't show no badge or nothing. I didn't know he was a cop. You know, he walked up to me and says, "You're using obscene language. You're under arrest for using obscene language." I say, "Man, the free speech movement, we just got through winning in the Supreme Court. We can say the four-letter word. But you," I said, "Man, fuck you." We were terrible in those days, but I'm telling you, man. And the free, you know, this guy, it started a fight, and then 4 or 5 undercovers jumped on me, and the crowd who had heard the point, you know, man, they started hollering, "Leave him alone, he's done nothing," shooting, hollering, "Leave him alone, he's done nothing. Leave him alone, he's done nothing." And you know, on Telegraph Avenue, there's hordes of people, right? They all across the street, so the people across the street started hollering, "Leave him alone, he's done nothing." I'm getting my ass beat down here on the ground by these 4 undercovers that dressed as hippies and all this kind of crap. And they shouted, and it got all the way a block away from hollering, "Leave him alone, he's done nothing." But my brother John Seal, who was with us, and Huey, he didn't get a chance to come over where I was. He got in a fight with the uniform cop. And boom, and well, don't go to, we went to jail. That's what happened. They arrested us, put us in jail. I got bailed out right away and called my wife up and said, come down here, get some of that money I've been making at city government down there and bail my ass out. I couldn't get Huey out because he was actually on parole already, but his parole officer let him come out, you know, etc. And I went before Judge Stats. And I said, "Judge Stats, this is my friend Huey Newton here." I says, "Now, I'm 7 years older than him, you know." I says, "But he's in law school." And I says, "You know, I had to hire him, you know. I hired him as a part-time assistant to myself at the North Oakland Neighborhood Service Center." I says, "And those cops lied in the preliminary hearing, Your Honor, because that guy walks up to me and he says, 'I'm arresting you for using obscene language.' And then I told him we won in the Supreme Court and I could curse all I want." And I says, and he got in the preliminary hearing and said he told me I was under arrest for blocking the sidewalk. And I wasn't blocking the sidewalk, Your Honor. I was standing on a chair next door to the parking meter near the curb. The other people was blocking the sidewalk because they stopped to hear me do the poem. I says, and Your Honor, it's not right. And Huey here has researched the law that we could get 1 to 10 years for fighting these police in prison, and it's not right, it's not fair. I run youth jobs programs for the North Oakland Neighborhood Service Center with the city of Oakland. Anyway, the judge gave us probation. And I said, "Huey, when we got downstairs at Alameda County, I says, meet me at the War on Poverty office tonight." "Wow, what we got to do?" I says, "Huey, we took some notes at my house. We was talking about starting a new organization. And we was going to write a 10-point program." I said, "So meet me down at the War on Poverty office tonight while everybody's away, and we're going to sit down and we're going to write this thing. Now, we got a law library up there, et cetera, and you could come on." So we went down and we wrote out this 10-point program, you know. We'd already had some notes done at my house. But, you know, the first point was we want freedom to power to determine our own destiny, our own community. That was all based on discussions that I had, you know, with you and with others in the community, that they're talking about black power this, black power that, you know what I mean? And I kept telling some of the people, I said, well, you ain't going to get no power until you get a hold of some of them political power seats. You know, some of these young black folks talking about, what you mean political power seats? I said, some of them goddamn city council seats. That's what I'm talking about. Them the white man seats. I said, you better try to make them the black man and the colored folk seats, because you ain't going to have no power. You ain't going to be able to make no laws, et cetera, and change these racist laws until you do that. You know what I mean? So we want power to determine our own destiny. Our own community meant that what I was going to do is that, let me explain something to you. When that book of Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael first came out, Black Power, okay, that was in 1965. I did a demographic research all across the country to find out how many black politicians that were duly elected. You know what I found out? There were only 50. This is 1965. Now, in the voting period of 1966 November, quite a few more black politicians was elected across the country. You know what I mean? But 50 when I first did my demographic research. And then I looked at the whole country. I found out when you took in account of all the political seats one can be elected to, from part-time city mayors and stuff to whatever county seats, supervisorial seats, sheriffs, etc. I mean, even California, what we have, 52, 54 counties or something like that. That's what I found. And I look all across the country, I found there were 500,000 political seats one can be elected to in the United States of America, and there was only 50 black folks duly elected to political office. Wasn't hardly no Hispanics that I knew of. There were some, though, you know what I mean? And the women, well, you know, they were slow, too. I mean, when you look out and say, wait a minute, this shit ain't right. I mean, no wonder we ain't got... And that's why I was arguing with these young boys. Y'all ain't going to have no power till you take over these political power seats. So I'm trying to tell you why I organized the Black Panther Party, a political party, and the technique and the method we did in getting it off the ground. Yeah, we wrote all the points, you know, and point number 7, one immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people, you know, and so on. We wrote all those points. My point is, Huey says we should patrol and observe the police. And why were we doing it with guns? That was because in Los Angeles, a year earlier, following the Watts riots in 1965, they had a group down there in Los Angeles called CAP, Community Alert Patrol. They had their little armbands, and they had law books and tape recorders. And they would stand around following the Watts riots. Remember the Watts riots? If you know anything about the Watts riots, you remember? 65 people were killed, black people were killed, 200 and some odd was wounded, and 5,000 arrested. My whole point was, damn, how can I organize 5,000 people in the community into a political electoral machine? You know what I mean? I heard about big-time operations going on in Chicago and how they have the political electoral machine. I said, how can we do this in our black communities here? You know what I mean? That's what has to happen. So that's what it was all about. So when we went out there to patrol the police and observe the police with law books, tape recorders, and guns, and remember, Huey was 2 years in law school. I mean, literally. And I told Huey, I said, you brought this idea up. Now, you have to research every law to make sure we're on legal ground, even though they're going to arrest us possibly, et cetera, whatever. Make sure we're on legal ground, et cetera, in patrolling the police with law books, tape recorders, and guns, et cetera, in relationship to our constitutional rights enumerated in the Constitution, et cetera, Huey. And he did that. I really have to give Huey credit for that. When I was trying to mentor him away from some other cheap activity he was doing, even though he was in law school. And that's what he did. And I really give him credit. He really went to research on that with his law professor in that private law school over there in San Francisco. And he put it together, you know. And me, you know, I structured the office. I did everything, you know, because I had the resources to create the Black Panther Party, buy extra shotguns, what have you, et cetera, you know. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, I bought some shotguns later on at another time with them red books, you know, and we sold a little red book. Get your red book, $1. In other words, I got red books for 20 cents a piece. The guy was selling them for 35 cents at the China bookstore in San Francisco somewhere, boom. And I says, well, I want to buy some of these red books. And they got... I said, I want to buy 50 of them. He says, well, I'll knock a nickel off. I said, wait a minute. I think I could get better. Anyway, I got him down to 20% when I bought 200 copies of it. And we came up right up here at the University of California, right there. We left our guns at home. We're raising money. You know what I mean? This is our fundraiser. You know what I mean? Get your red book, $1. Man, we sold them all 200 of them books in about an hour, right there and there. Ran back to the China bookstore and got 200 more and come back. You know? Then we heard about that there was going to be a big anti-war rally at Kezar Stadium over there in San Francisco. And we went over there, man. I only had about 14, 15 members. And we were I bought 2,500 Red books. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. I had a big paycheck, man. My paycheck was $600 and some odd dollars a month. That was a hellified paycheck for those days. And I worked for the city government. And, you know, man, I rented the office for $200 a month and this, whatever. But we sold them books. And we sold practically 3,000 of those books and had not even read the damn thing. Hadn't even read it. I'm just saying, those are the early days. We were a ragtag organization, but we were on point when it came to raising our funds and getting ourselves done. And then we disciplined everybody. Everybody had to know the 10-point platform and program before they go out and patrol the police. We only had about 14 or 15 people, that we were training. The guns, oh man, I was expert with guns from the time I was 12 years of age. My father, with all his hunting, my father had about 25 hunting buddies. And there was always 10 or 12 or 14 of us. We hunted all over California, all Northern California, Mount Shasta up in Weed and McLeod and those places there, mule-tailed deer, and then we held deer in the lower counties, etc. We hunted small game, big game, pheasant, rabbit, you name it, etc. We go on rabbit drives, etc. We had 2 greyhound dogs, you know what I mean? Boy, these are greyhound dogs, and we let them dogs go out there chasing them rabbits, and one was a female, and and them dogs be hitting it, boy. And the rabbit be trying to move, and they'd move, and finally that female, she was in front. She would hit that rabbit and grab him and throw him up in the air, and the dog in the back behind would catch him. Now, if I write my screenplay, I got stuff, I'm telling you, man. And I was a young man when we used to do that, 14 years old, My father bought me my 30-30 Winchester high-powered rifle when I was 12 years of age, and I was with the big guys. These guys had 30-06s. My daddy had a 300 Savage lever action, whatever. I mean, I don't know. Later in life, I stopped hunting and killing animals. Them high-powered rifles. Anyway, my point is, gun is only a tool to be used in a particular time, in a particular situation, etc. And we decided to patrol the police with law books, tape recorders, and guns. And when we're that night in the nightlight district, my God, 20, 30 people gathered as we gathered. And the cop, he hadn't even looked up to see us. He was sitting in his passenger side talking on the radio while his arrestee was standing at the back with his hand on the trunk. And old man come out the stove. What them boys got in their hands, sticks or something? It was dark, he couldn't see. Big tall guy over there, he said, told him, be quiet, man. Them boys got guns. And the cop kind of heard that. And then the old man said, I'm getting out of here. And then Huey says, no one leave, everyone stay right here. We have a right, we researched the law to stand and observe these police. When Huey had his back to the police officer was getting out of the car. I was watching him because I carried an Army 45 in a holster. And I watched the cop. The cop got out of the car. You have no right to observe me. And Hewitt says, no, California State Supreme Court ruling states that every citizen, wait a minute, listen to me. California State Supreme Court ruling states that every citizen has a right to stand and observe a police officer carrying out their duty as long as they stand a reasonable distance away. A reasonable distance that particular ruling is constituted as 8 to 10 feet. I'm standing approximately 20 feet from you, and we'll observe you whether you like it or not. And some sister says, well, go ahead on and tell it, brother. The cop says, is that gun loaded? Hewitt said, if I know it's loaded, it's good enough. Well, I have a right. You have no right whatsoever. Hewitt's right cited something, United States Supreme Court versus so-and-so and so-and-so. Therefore, you cannot remove my property from me without due process of law. Step back. You cannot touch my weapon. And the tall black guy says, man, what kind of Negroes is these? I never forgotten that. That was a scene, when I look back on that, That was something. Well, it's not about, I got up off of that thing about calling people Uncle Tom. What I was dealing with, what we were dealing with there, we were taking a chance. We were young, we were spry, we were researchers, we knew our history. I knew my history backwards, forward, sideways, and countercurrent. I mean, I digested books like W.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction, Dr. Herbert Apthacker's documentation of all the wars we fought in, Dr. Herbert Apthacker's other documentation of 250 slave revolts from the year 1800 to 1857, and what he constituted as a slave revolt involved 10 or more slaves. And when I read that stuff, it blew my mind, because I didn't know we had resisted like that in doing slavery. You know what I mean? Because they just took that history away, and there I was. So these are the things. And back in those days, I was surprised. Oh my God, to know that history, and boom, to know that in Reconstruction period, there were several black men elected to Congress. You know what I mean? They were politicians, and this is in late 1860s doing Reconstruction. This is the kind of stuff that knocked me out when reading that history, and boom, and understanding that. Wow. And we started this organization. Well, I guess we were a ragtag little organization, 14, 15, 16, but it got all over the community. Bobby Seale and Huey Newton out here patrolling the police. We would hear people say, "Yeah, I saw them police out there arresting boy one night, and back here a couple of weeks ago, and I told them that they better not brutalize the boy. I called Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and them with their guns over here." I mean, you captured the imagination of the people. But the objective here was not about wanting a shootout. What we wanted to do was what we was doing, capture the imagination of the people. And my point, and then I'm going to organize them into a political electoral machine. That's what this organization was about. And it took time. In the first year, we never had no more than 50 members. I led an armed delegation May 2nd, 1967 to the California State Legislature to oppose a piece of legislation, the Mulford Act. And that Mulford Act that finally got passed in the latter part of May was saying that we could not carry loaded guns inside city limits within 150 feet of public property. That was the crux. Within 150 feet of public property, you couldn't carry a loaded weapon. And see, they were slick inside city limits. You see, they didn't say outside city limits because they didn't want to infringe upon hunters' rights, right? I mean, and the NRA. But the NRA was saying we shouldn't have no right to carry no gun nowhere. Yeah, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, saying them Black Panthers shouldn't have. That's what they said. You know what I mean? Anyway, they made that law, and that's why I went to the California State Legislature, And we got up there, and I read my statement outside. Then I went read Ronnie Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the governor. He was on the front lawn out there, and he was speaking to 200 future leaders, young kids. I mean, they were 10, 11, and 12 years of age. That's all they did. These were. And when we came up with all our guns, walking up to walk, and Ronnie was over there, some of the young kids, young white kids, they saw us. They thought we were a cool gun club. You know what I mean? They come running over. Neat 30-06. Some of the kids even knew what kind of rifles we had. Boom, boom, boom. And we went inside, and I kept asking the press. I had a hordes of press. I'm talking about 50, 60 press people, cameras, print, radio, whatever. I says, where's the spectator section where citizens can sit and watch the legislature make law? That's what we want. And we walk in, and we take the elevator, and the press saying this way, that way, this way. 5 party members got ahead of me inside the legislature, and instead of going to the spectator section, they walked in on the floor of the actual assembly. And then they walked down the aisle, you know what I mean? And, we rest our guns on our shoulders like that, you know what I mean? And right down the aisle, several of the assemblymen ducked under their desks. But the president pro tem banging the gavel, He didn't say anything about the guns. The cameramen came inside the state assembly, inside inside the floor of the assembly. Bam, bam, the president program. The press, boom, are not allowed on the floor while the assembly is in session. The press, and he was talking about the 5 or 6 cameras. Well, you know how newsmen are. They might not have been allowed in there, but since Bobby Seale and his people walked in there with guns, we going in there anyway. They could have cared less about him. That's all he was banging. And I went in there, I says, come on, you guys, because they got ahead of me. I says, just get out of here, man, come on. And, you know, and then another guy was ducking under his seat. I said, hey, man, I'm sorry. They led us in the wrong place. Come on, you guys, let's get. I mean, so that's the way it really was. Ronald Reagan called me a hoodlum and a thug. Oh, my God, that pissed me off. Guy called me a goddamn hoodlum. You know, and the first thing out of my, I worked the Gemini missile program. That asshole son of a bitch, who the fuck he thought called a hoodlum? You know, my point is, that's my action-reaction relationships. But that started this organization. And then we never had one shootout in that year. We had a lot of standoffs. We never had shooters because we wrapped the law up to the cop anyway. You know, cop. Cop would stop us, so he would crack his window. He didn't open it all the way, and he would stick his license through. Remember, Badge 206 said, "Who do you niggas think you are? Get out of them cars with them guys." And this guy's 20 feet away, walking towards the car. And then he stopped, "Get the hell out of them cars." I mean, this guy, where the hell he was coming from. Badge 206, I wrote about it in my book, Seize the Time, Badge 206. And he walks up to the car, and then Huey had stuck his license out, and he slaps the license out of Huey's hand, grabs the door handle, opens the door. Huey is driving. I'm sitting in the passenger front seat, holding the barrel of Huey's shotgun, because I carried an Army 45 holstered. Little Bobby Hutton is in the back with a M1 carbine, and this cop reaches inside across Huey with his head inside to grab the top of the barrel, all in split second, of the shotgun that I'm pulling back on. And little Bobby Hutton comes up from the rear of the back seat and hits the cop in the head with the butt of his M1 carbine. Bam! And then Huey, boom, boom, boom. And they kick him out the car. I come around and come out the front. Little Bobby come out the back. Huey gets his shotgun. And Badge 206 is stumbled back. And he looks up, and we got him surrounded. And he wants to go for his gun. Huey said, "You go for it, I'll blow your brains out." And I said, "Who the hell you think you are anyway? Come up here from Tallahassee." I'm a big-time comedian, right? Come here from Tallahassee, cut, shoot, where come from, think you gonna brutalize us, motherfucker? Don't you understand what the fuck you doing wrong here? And and then the lady said, "Don't y'all shoot the police." I said, "We ain't gonna shoot him as long as you don't draw his gun." I said, "Hey, cop, you wanna go to your car? Go to your car." He did, we let him go, boom, 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 boom. He went to, wait a minute, he went to car, he called some more cops. But that was a time, a year after the Watts riots. And they had special DAs, and they had a system set up where various reverends and people in the communities would coordinate to try to keep down any riots at the time. Remember, it's a year and a half or two after the Watts riots, and that system had been set up. And that's what happened that night. And when the cops came, boom, 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 we did not shoot. You cannot take our guns from us. No. Boom, boom, boom. And finally, the cops left. And the DA even came out there. He says, "The gun's illegal." And Badge 206, "But we got to get him on something." So it was my old car Huey was driving, right? And my license plate was on with a coat hanger. They gave me a ticket for that. But we had a lot of confrontation, but we didn't have any shootouts in that whole 1 year. And it was no more than 50 people in the 1 year. And it was not until Dr. Martin Luther King was killed that people rushed and flooded my organization. from the time that Dr. Martin Luther King was killed, April 4th, 1968, to November 1968, when Nixon was elected, my organization swelled from 400 members up and down the West Coast to 5,000 members in 49 chapters and branches, NCFFs, etc. Our coalition politics crossed all racial and ethnic lines, etc., etc. Ours was about all power to all the people, and that's what it's still about to this day. And every issue and everything and every plank and every point in the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party, the community and the people are still working. So it's just a process that we have to move. We have to build a broader and more profound, progressive legislative framework, a very dedicated progressive legislative framework, like Sister Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Most people don't know, a lot of people don't know that Congresswoman Barbara Lee worked with the Black Panther Party in her early days. They don't know that Bobby Rush was with the Illinois State Chapter of the Black Panther Party, where Fred Hampton and Mark Clark was killed and murdered by the FBI. He's a United States Congressman, etc. But Maxine Waters and quite a few, there are 90 progressive voting representatives in the House of Representatives. And we need 3 times that much to get the infrastructure bill, to get the climate change bill, to get all the bills that's necessary, to get the kind of legislation we need that revolves more political, economic, ecological, and social justice power into the hands of the people. Thank you very much.
You want to do the questions? We're going to let them ask questions. We're going to let them ask questions.
Okay.
Ken will come back up and...
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you handle the questions?
I know there are some questions out there, and we have a mic right over here, so if you have a question for Bobby or Steve, if you'd raise your hand. We have 2 mics?
Go ahead, ask your question. Speak loud so everybody can get the benefit of what you're asking. Who's going to go first? Where's my buddy Judy Gumbo at? There she is. Right on, Judy. How you doing, dear? Right on. Power to the people.
First off, I'd like to thank you, Brother Bobby, for coming and speaking to us. I have 2 questions, very short. In terms of what role do you think that a lack of an emphasis on sobriety had on the decline and fall of the Panthers? And to go into that, what role do you think that God consciousness and spirituality has in liberation struggles?
To the extent that anything you do is progressive. In other words, you can go around here and all this kind of crazy crap. You got religious nuts out here also. You know what I mean? That's saying God said this and God said, I ain't got time for that. I have no time for no terrorists. I'm telling you. I ain't got time to. To me, terrorists ain't nothing but international Ku Klux Klaners nowadays. That's all I mean. The indiscriminate killing of people is, anybody who's running around here talking about they got a cause and they're going to go around indiscriminately killing and murdering people, they have stepped totally outside of the civility of what human liberation is about. Totally outside of it. So I'm saying it's got to be progressive. Whatever programs, whatever things, whatever kind of legislation, it's got to be progressive. It's got to be about people's constitutional, democratic, civil, human rights. And we, step by step, piece by piece, we got to change this system. We live in an overdeveloped, high-tech, fast-paced, computerized, scientific, technological, social order. We're not living back in the other days. We're not even living in the 50s, 50 years ago when I started the Black Panther Party. All we had was an A.B. Dick machine, a goddamn A.B. Dick machine. That's what we had to communicate with the community. You guys got technology here, you know what I mean? And when we don't need no guns out there to watch the police. We got everybody got a goddamn cell phone, and every other body can take a motherfucking picture, excuse myself. And if you can catch some son of a bitch doing something wrong, just take the picture. We gonna publicize this shit. We gonna concentrate the people. That's what you got to do. We don't need no guns. I mean, peaceful protest is a constitutional, democratic, civil human right. And I stood on defending our constitutional right. I defended Dr. Martin Luther King. I may have had a coalition with Dr. Martin Luther King before. And you see how Dr. Martin Luther King was in all his spirituality, as you may want to put it, etc., and all his spirituality he had, he was progressive. He was progressive about ending this discrimination, etc., and he was out there, he was not playing. Yeah, that's what, next question, please.
Excuse, what could you perhaps answer on the sobriety piece? What role do you think that a lack of emphasis on sobriety had on the decline of
Lack of emphasis on sobriety.
sobriety?
You mean whether or not you're getting drunk or not?
Yes, sir.
Whether or not you getting smoking dope or not?
Yes, sir.
Well, me, I didn't. I drank scotch. Wait a minute. When Lil Bobby Hutton got killed, I used to get get me every other day. I would buy me a half a pint of scotch, and I'd sip on it. You know, and I eat and boom, and you know, I always had cooking crews in the Black Panther Party, but I wasn't what you call non-functional. But whatever. Now, my friend Huey, in the last days that I was there in the Black Panther Party, he tripped out on drugs, and he didn't play no role for what the continuing struggle was about at that time. But that's another problem. So I drink a lot of beer, you know, what have you, but I used to sip scotch after Lil Bobby Hutton got killed, you know. But I still organized 5,000 people all across this country. I was able to go to all these chapters and all these branches and teach these party members how to put up programs and unify people in the community and register people to vote. That's what's important. So for whatever religious or spirituality you want to go through, boom, I try to make sure that what's good for me and what I think is good for humanity is to learn to make sure and try to make sure that your ideas, your beliefs, and whatever notions you have, as much as possible, make sure they correspond correctly to reality. So you're always kind of you're always trying to find out about the reality of things. I deal in reality. So I don't abstract the absurd, etc. Now, those who need that spirituality to soothe themselves or get themselves focused, etc., fine, that's great. You know what I mean? But other than that, spirituality, man, shoot. Yeah, I get high off the fact that we got with the breakfast program and we honed those few politicians we had after '66 and what have you, et cetera. Man, Willie Brown, we got him, Miller and some others, you know what I mean, and some white liberals too, and got them guys going, and they put a bill in to Ronald Reagan for $5 million for free breakfast and free lunch programs for the whole state of California. And then they sent it to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan vetoed $4 million of it. They took that bill, went back through the state assembly, back through the Senate, the state Senate, and overrode Ronald Reagan's button, put the whole damn $5 million in, which he tried to veto. And in the next year and a half, 28 state legislatures across the country did something similar about that. So I say that's one program that we put over at one point. Now, the objective was, how can we get to a point where we are making legislation, whether it's by referendum to the ballot or getting legislation, 150 or 1,001 pieces of kinds of legislation that shift things in terms economically, political, social justice-wise, giving more empowerment to the people. That's what the struggle is about. Next question, please. Huh?
Do you want?
Use the mic.
Chairman Bobby, Mr. Shames, thank you both for being here very much. I'm gonna keep this question short. What is the Black Panther Party is very much in the media today. We've seen documentaries produced about it. We have seen more books come out recently. I want to know what's your biggest frustration with how the Black Panther Party is being portrayed today, and what is the biggest difference between the way we're seeing it and learning about it now and the reality of how it actually was.
My biggest frustration is that behind the scenes, the COINTELPRO FBI operations interrupts and gets involved behind the scenes, even in me trying to get my feature films out. You see, I've been through processes recently with ABC and other people, et cetera. But these people, when I tell them about what's got to happen with the screenplay, what's got to happen with the story, et cetera, they want to try to debunk my screenplay and my story and start saying other people going around. I said, no, you can't do that. No. And back in 1991, 92, I got a whole big contract with Warner Brothers Pictures, me, and with that, you know, David Hilliard, his book and my book, and I negotiated that contract, and that was for a feature, not a series, television series, but that was for a feature, and I got a $550,000 contract deal. $375,000 for my literary property, $75,000 to help develop the screenplay, and then I negotiated myself a producer position. You gonna be a producer? I says, yeah. You talking about the Black Panther Party, right? Well, I said, well, who produced the Black Panther Party? So they gave me a producer position. You know, for so much money. My point. And then, you know, I got my wife. She helped me write my Lonely Rage and my books and stuff, and she's great in literary because, you know, I get A's in math, but man, I to this day I get C's in language arts, and I have to get my wife and other people and sisters to correct my shit. You know what I mean? So I can get an A on my papers. You know, I just, you know. So I'm just saying.
Well, you got an A in this book, Bobby.
But I did. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
you got
I
an
didn't
A in
know.
this book.
Well, you got a A+ on this photography work you doing. I'm telling you. No, I met Steve. You know, he took the picture, boom, 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 and he came back around, boom, boom, boom. And I says, what you doing? You documenting? He says, as much as possible. I said, well, look at here, man. You gonna take pictures? I said, you gonna supply pictures to us for my party newspaper? He said, sure, whatever you want. So I says, okay, right on. And then I called him again. I said, I want you to train a party member here also to be a photographer. Because I says, boom, you know. And he trained Lauren Williams. And Lauren Williams is a great little photographer right now to this day. Lauren Williams, she had fights with the police in San Francisco, but her daddy was a police officer. But her daddy supported the Black Panther Party, and he was a San Francisco police officer. I'm telling you, we had a lot of little breaks and things. I had one police officer, his name was Sergeant Williams, a recruiter way before we started the party, and he would come to Merritt College with his recruitment truck, et cetera. And I got to know this guy and talk to him every day, et cetera, boom, boom, boom. And he says, yeah, you're right, there's racism. He was a black guy. He was saying, you're right, there's racism. And he says, and I need to get more of you young folks, black folks, into this police department, et cetera, boom, 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 boom. I'm saying every cop was not a vicious racist. It just wasn't. It's not a fact. I've been out there. I've been in situations. I remember one time we walked down the streets because the cop was arresting somebody, et cetera, because some kids told us to come down there. And this cop, you know, saw us with our guns. He knew we had guns, et cetera. He said, Newton and Seal, see, you still got your guns, huh? And he kept writing and stuff. He said, if you guys want to bail this guy out, his name is so-and-so, see you guys, bye, boom, boom, boom. But then I just told you about badge 206. Oh, man, this dude almost caused us to kill his ass. You see what I mean? You know, and boom. But we had a level of discipline about the responsibility that we were taking out there. You know what I mean? So we weren't hoodlums. We weren't thugs. And that film, Panther, that Melvin Van Peebles did in 1995, it does no justice to what our story was. So I'm still having a problem today. And I'm working. Every time you go to my website and buy books from me, you're helping to support me because I'm evolving, and I got little independent pieces of money, step by step, piece by piece. I'm going to put my films together and tell the real story with my Black Panther Party members and all my white left radical friends and all my Chicano brothers and sisters and all my Hispanic brothers and sisters, et cetera, who was coalesced. And here's a program that you all should come see. And this is the 21st. It's at the OSHA, Berkeley Repertory Theater. There's a film in this. And this is all about the Rhines. The Rhines. You've heard of, before Snowden, these people, Bonnie and John Rhines, stole the FBI files in 1971, whatever it was. They stole these files. And that's how we learned about the counterintelligence program of the FBI. They exposed the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover and these other idiots out here. So we have the Black Panther Party, National Alumni Association. We have a program at Berkeley Repertory Theater, but there's the OSHA Studios that are here in Berkeley. On the 21st is you can buy a ticket for a $20 ticket for the 2 o'clock show that day. Friday the 21st, or the 7 o'clock show. And check that out, because I will be there. Kathleen Cleaver, who's a prominent sister who was organizing with us in the Black Panther Party, will be there. And we have some other people there. And we have the Rhines there. Bonnie Rhines and John Rhines, who actually stole the files. We're flying them in, you know. And we charge $20 for the thing so we can help pay for bringing them all out here and stuff like that. But that's part of our programs. Besides the 22nd, we got another program. Next question, please.
I think, right?
Oh, I'm
One more
sorry.
question. One more question.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. We heard you talk about the importance of political power in voting. I was wondering if you would share with us who you plan to vote for president.
I'm gonna vote for. Look, let me tell you something. Everybody, I liked Bernie when he came out. Okay, wasn't no two words about it. But just because Bernie ain't win, I ain't gonna go run out. I ain't voting for nobody. See, I don't even want to hear that. If I got somebody, especially, even if it hadn't been Trump, I would have voted for Hillary, because I think we can get something out of her. I think we can get not only an infrastructure bill, I think we can get a joint infrastructure climate change bill. In other words, Barack Obama 6-7 years ago shot a bill through for infrastructure that would have created 1.5 million jobs in the country, all right? Middle class jobs, et cetera. You know what I mean? The way you're talking about building the middle class back up, et cetera, boom, boom, boom. That's what would have happened, all right? Now, we know the right wing, the Republicans and all of them blocked that. They blocked anything progressive and relevant like that Barack Obama wanted to do. So I'm hoping and wishing that we will support, et cetera. I'm hoping that it's a landslide. I'm hoping that Trump goes down so bad in the numbers. Wait a minute. Let me finish to explain to me that we want. I would like to see Hillary win by 60%. I'd like to see the Republicans so split and messed up, et cetera, that half of them ain't gonna come out and vote, and it would cause Nancy Pelosi and us to take over the House of Representatives and the Senate, and then we can put not just a 1.5 million job bills through. We'll have a climate change and infrastructure bill that could amount to 5 million jobs that we could evolve with the right legislation. Remember what I'm talking about? It's about legislation that make human sense. That's what it was about. Political power, people's power. And we got to do this stuff. This is what was happening. I'm hoping like hell we do that, because it's very clear to me, you know, the right wing, the corporate money rich, the Koch brothers, and they billionaire clubs and all that kind of crap, you know what I mean? Boom, 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 boom. About doing what? Getting tax breaks while they got their money that ain't been taxed yet in offshore accounts in most cases, et cetera, boom, 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 boom. and saying the hell with any goddamn programs for the people. They're trying to break us, make us poor, etc. We got to turn this shit around, and we got to make those jobs out there. And I don't give a damn if it do cost another extra $1 trillion. We got to do it. We got to do it because we got to save this planet. We need ecological justice and evolving a balanced ecology, etc. This has got to happen. I have a little program that I'm working on, and I'm working on proposals and grants. I call it the Environmental Renovation Youth Jobs Project. You know what I mean? Now, you know, I told you, I love programs, youth jobs programs, and I like to put stuff together, you know, and so it's about teaching youth, worth getting them jobs doing it on apprenticeship levels, etc. Once I do the preliminary, my program does the preliminary introduction to building and construction, etc., and eco-friendly materials to be integrated into the process, etc. I'm saying this is the kind of thing. I want to teach youth, young men and women to own their own houses. You know what I mean? I'm saying that I remember Habitat. And they asked me 20 years ago, because I created youth jobs programs in Philadelphia and other places where I live, social responsibility programs for Gene Kronholm at Temple University and all this kind of stuff. But my point is, I says, you want me to bring the youth to volunteer, the poor and low-income youth, to volunteer building houses. I said, that's nice. I says, but I need them to have jobs. They, you know, I can cut down crime if I know that I'm having thousands and thousands of youth with jobs. So I created my own program, you know, the Environmental Renovation Youth Jobs. So I go and I'm looking for grants, etc. You know, grants and grant programs, because I have a training program. I'm a carpenter, I'm a builder, I'm an architect. I got all kinds of skills. I was lucky to grow up with all kinds of skills and trades. I mean, really, I had no problem getting nobody no job. You know what I mean? Getting myself a job. I always had a job. I quit my engineering job after 3.5 years just to work in the grassroots community on another job. You see what I mean? And then another one, and another one, wound up on the city government. I was working for the city government when I created the Black Panther Party. You know what I mean? I remember my director, he says, "What is this?" I says, "That's a 10-point platform and program. What are you doing with that?" I said, "Well, this is a war on poverty program. We fighting poverty." The Black Panther Party. He left and went out. Boom. I led an armed delegation to the California State Legislature. Then my big-time supervisor, he happened to be an African-American. He was pissed off at me. "What did you go up there with all them guns for?" He loved my work, you know what I mean? And I says, "Hey," he says, "they're forcing me to fire you. I don't want to fire you." I said, "You got to fire me, brother. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's all in the struggle. Ain't gonna." I'm just trying to tell you, I was lucky to have skills and trades and professions, you know what I mean? And yeah, you know, boom. But youth, I want to create frameworks where they have jobs in building their houses and learning how to own their own homes, et cetera, et cetera. That's a form of necessary wealth that every family needs to have, that individual right to have a home and a place to live that's theirs. You see what I'm getting at? We live in an overdeveloped, high-tech, fast-paced, computerized, scientific, technological, social order. We're not living back in those days. We have to move this thing along. We have to get these kinds of pieces of legislation, all these positive, relevant pieces of legislation that Bernie Sanders talked about, et cetera, and so on. And this has got to happen. Power to the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Bobby Seale and Stephen Shames. Thank you all for coming. Please tell your friends about the show at the Reva and David Logan Gallery. The show will be up until the end of December. Thanks for coming.